Welcome, and it's that time of the week again. It's the Ort Jet Business Show. I'm your host, David Zidel, and we're going to talk business. We've got a great evening, and I'm really looking forward to this interview. It's with Ian Fuhr. He's a serial entrepreneur. He started, which you might know, the Sorbet group, and we're going to ask him about his process with that and a number of different things that he's been involved in. But before we get there, Ian, I normally have a little business story that I give. Twerdsky, many years ago, I heard him give a talk about the lobster. And he said that the way the lobster grows is that I think they call it molting. So its body grows and then it grows too big for the shell that it's in. So the shell's there to protect it, but internally it grows too big. And it has to go and shed that shell. And while it does that, it grows another shell, slightly softer, and it hides under a rock because now it's in danger. Its protection is gone. It knows that, but it still does that. And in fact, it does that many times. In the first 5 to 7 years of its life, it does it about 25 times. So it's almost about 5 times a year that it takes this massive risk to grow. The interesting thing about it, and what Rabbi Twerdsky said, was if the lobster had access to the medical advice of humans, it would never grow. Because when it felt the pain, it would then take some pills. It would go to hospital. It would find a cure for the pain, not realizing that these are literally what we call growing pains. And often, and by speaking to a lot of the entrepreneurs like yourself, and maybe you can pick up on it later, that things do go wrong and things are painful, but you work your way through it because that's part of the entrepreneurial journey. Linked to that is in America, I think it's in Arizona, they've got something called a biosphere 2. And they try to mimic what would happen if we lived on Mars. And they created an environment that was completely enclosed, and people went and lived in that with the environment creating its own resources. And that failed. And one of the big reasons it failed was after about 2 years, the big trees started falling over. And they realized that they couldn't recreate wind. And the trees needed the wind to fight against to strengthen their own roots. Again, another story like that. And so we've got to look through the pain of things and learn the pleasure that you come through that, but growing comes through these struggles. One of the things that recently I've started adopting with that, we live quite far from where my kids go to school. And I used to say, I have to take the kids to school. And I've changed that now to, I have the opportunity to bond with the kids. Everything we go to has 2 sides to the coin. Which side do you focus on? It's human nature to focus on what's wrong. But if we can force ourselves to focus on the benefits of that. So yes, I have to take the kids to school, but I have this massive benefit of bonding with them every morning.
Sounds great.
Great.
Nice stories. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you. But it's not about my story, it's about your story. Let me just give you some background to Ian before I start asking him some questions. He's the founder of the Sorbet Group, the largest chain of beauty salons in South Africa. He's the current CEO of Hatch Institute, and they help companies with both leadership and culture. And Ian will unpack how important culture is in all businesses. And he says, if you can get the environment right, if you can build a community of people that accept and respect and trust each other, then we have a much better chance of being successful in whatever business we build. Interesting story that Ian, together with his brother, opened the first Kmart in South Africa. And if you think,
Indeed.
You think Kmart in South Africa, he was, I think, 22 years old, and started Kmart not understanding that you need to get the license, etc., and ran it for about 10 years until he got sued by Kmart. And then he changed it to a company called Supermart and eventually sold it to the Edcon Group and renamed Jetmart. Ian has been in retailing, he's been in the music industry, and, as we said, running the Leadership Institute. Ian started the Sorbet Group in 2005 and initially opened 6 stores. And by 2009, the group had 22 stores. And when he finally sold it, it had 220 stores. Ian's the author of 4 books. It's The Entrepreneurial Journey, The Sorbet Story, Cultureneering, and The Human Bridge. He owned, as I said, in the music business, he owned a company with famous people being part of it, like Hugh Masekela. And in fact, Ian's father, Kenny, was a founding director of Russell's Store. So I'm sure you've heard that saying, we've all got an uncle in the furniture business. In Ian's case, he actually had a father in the furniture business. And Ian will share with you the story, and we'll get to that a little bit later, with the Sorbet stores, which I love. When he started it and looking for people to run the stores, he actually thought he was looking for beauty therapists to become business people. And he found it was much more successful the other way around, by getting business people to adapt to the beauty industry.
100%.
So I want to ask you, Ian, if we can start off, the importance of a credible and viable business model, the significance of building culture and service philosophy. And part of it is because recently I went into a Sorbet store, and there was an offer for it to be free. If you're not happy with the service, it's for free. And a lot of people would think that's a risk. So can you unpack your business philosophy for us, and something that maybe you think we could take as entrepreneurs?
Okay, thanks very much for that intro, David, and thanks for having me. So I think what happened over the years, right from the early Kmart days when I knew less than nothing, and by the way, we even used their logo, which wasn't so bright, and I realized, particularly then in the socio-political environment of the apartheid days, that the staff were not terribly interested in serving customers at that point in time. They were much more interested in freedom and what was happening outside of the organization, and working in the company was just a way to make a living. And so we had to change that. And then I started to focus on culture. And culture in this particular case, or in those days, was how do you get people in a diverse working environment to feel a sense of belonging in the company? And because until such time as you do that, it's highly unlikely they're going to go out there and serve to the very best of their ability. No employees come into the business every morning singing the joys of making profits for the shareholder. That is not why they're there. They don't really care about that. So the thing is, what is going to motivate them to go out there? And I often got asked, how did you motivate the 3,500 people that saw that? And the simple answer to that was, I didn't motivate any of them, quite frankly, because people have to motivate themselves. So my role was to try and inspire them to motivate themselves. And that was the key. And the only way I could do that was to make them feel comfortable in the environment. So everybody, regardless of their differences, would have a sense of belonging. They would feel trusted and respected. They would feel a sense of dignity and equality and fair treatment. They would feel that their contributions were valued, and that they had made a significant contribution to the business, that they were heard, they felt safe to speak up, etc., etc. All of those things that make people feel comfortable in working environment. If you could create that, you would get what we call a common purpose.
So I want to come back to this common purpose.
Okay.
But at the radio station, we've also got a common purpose.
Okay.
And that is to make money through the ad break. So we'll be back after the break. Welcome back. I'm David Zidel. This is the Ort Jet Business Show. I'm talking to Ian Fuhr, who has done many different things, but one of the greatest things that you might be aware of is the founder of the Sorbet Group. He started talking about inspiring people and having a common purpose. But I want to go back a little bit before that. Just talk us through, how did you come up with the idea of starting Sorbet, and what were the actual steps? Because a lot of us have these great ideas and nothing ever happens from it. So if you can remember and take us back, how did you go from nothing to 220 stores?
So after I had sold the retail business to Edcon, I wasn't employed there for about 6 months, thinking of something to do. And I was having a massage one day, and the lady that was doing the massage said to me, "Why don't you look at the beauty industry?" And I told her to have a good look at my face and see if that was the right face for the beauty industry. And she said that didn't matter. But the point was that there was a gap in the market, apparently. So I asked her if there was a market in the gap. And she said, yes, there are no beauty salon chains in the whole of South Africa under a single brand with multiple units.
So just if I can ask you, and you said it just off the cuff, is there a gap in the market and is there a market in the gap?
Yes.
Just explain that.
Okay, well, the gap in the market we all understand. Okay, there's an opportunity. But is there a market in the gap? In other words, is there a real business to be had there? And it's really nice to say that there's an opportunity, but can we make it work? And the reason for not having any chains was always quite fascinating for me, because that was the first question you asked. Why are there no chains? So what am I getting myself into here, where people have been before and obviously not been very successful? And I realized quite soon afterwards, which we'll come back to later, was about consistency of service. You know, that if you're going to have multiple units of a particular brand, you need to be able to go into any of those, whether it's in Polokwane in the north or at the waterfront in Cape Town. You want to have the same service with the same attitudes as well, which makes it even more difficult. So anyway, I decided, okay, this is worth taking a shot. Went and bought about 5 or 6 stores, independent beauty salons, under different names, just to learn the business. The name Sorbet, people say, what a great name. Quite frankly, I didn't think it was a great name afterwards, because every time I went into a shopping center looking for spaces, they told me they already had ice creams. So that didn't work so well for me. So in fact, I learned there that it's not the name that builds a business, it's the business that builds the name.
Wow.
The name Sorbet sounded great after 200 stores, but in the beginning it wasn't such a great name. But it was fun, and I liked the idea. It wasn't my idea, by the way. I didn't come up with that name. I went to an advertising agency, and they came up with a name. I asked them, I said, please give me a list of names that have nothing to do with beauty. Because in those days, there was lots of beauty salons, you know, Jenny's Nails and Beverly's this, and it was all very sort of traditional beauty type names. And I wanted nothing to do with beauty. I wanted everything that we did from day one to be different. But I think the really important thing about Sorbet, which very few people know really, is how it started from a culture point of view. So I had been developing this culture framework over many years, over all those various businesses that you spoke about, and learning and developing. So when I eventually sold Supermart to Edcon, I had this culture framework that I had been working on. And I was keen to use that culture framework in a new business.
So this was almost like an experiment, a culture experiment.
It was a culture experiment. I wanted to prove that this culture could work in a new business. So unlike a typical entrepreneurial startup where you have an idea and you try and build it and you tweak it and you scale it and then you build a culture, etc., etc. This was completely different. I already had the culture. I knew exactly what the culture was going to look like. All I needed was a business. And so it just turned out to be the beauty industry. It certainly wasn't. You know, I knew nothing about beauty.
If you're just wondering who's sparing all these words of wisdom, it's Ian Fuhr, the founder of the Sorbet Group. And so you're telling us about the culture. So you started with the culture?
Yes.
And you use this culture experiment. So just explain that a bit more. How did you do that?
Okay, so what I did right from the beginning, I mean, I didn't understand the beauty business. I needed help with that. I mean, I thought a Brazilian was a person who lived in Brazil. so I mean, really, I knew nothing. And so I was just focused on the people side, and I got people to help me on the beauty side. So on the people side, I decided to have the induction training myself. I did the induction training for every person that ever joined the Sorbet Group.
And that was obviously induction on running the business, not the beauty aspects or
On the culture,
on the
mainly
culture.
on the culture. The running of the business, I had other people. In fact, I was very, very fortunate to have my 3 children involved, and my niece and my daughter-in-law and a few others. And they were all helping to run the business. I had other partners as well. And I was focused very largely on the people side. That's always been my interest.
So talk us through, when you say culture, what were the things that you were teaching these people when they joined the business? What did you focus on?
Yeah. So that's an interesting one. I think back in the early 90s, somebody, in fact, taught me a lesson. I can't remember his name. Jerry Skatema, his name. Jerry Skatema. He was a political economist on TV. And he said to me, Ian, the purpose of work is not to make money, it's to serve. And he just said it like that casually. And I said, really, and then I started thinking about it, and I said, wow. And that became the game changer. That changed my life, it changed my management style, it changed everything. To me, if you can get that instilled into people's minds, that I come to work to serve the needs and wants of my customers, if I do that well, I'll make money. Unfortunately, most people come to make money. They want to earn a living, they want to do this, they want to improve their skills, etc., etc. And I say, no. Those things are rewards. They are not the purpose. There's a very big difference between purpose and reward. The purpose is to make people feel good in terms of the Sorbet story. Because why do they come to beauty salons? They come because they want to feel good. And we want to make them feel good, and we want to make them feel better when they leave than when they arrived. So that was the first thing, but to share with everybody that's why we exist. We don't exist to make money. Money is the reward. It's not the purpose. And once people got the hang of that and they started to buy into it, then it starts to improve the service, and they start to realize the impact of what they're doing, because it's not just now sitting there at a nail table or at a massage bed or whatever it is. It's now touching people's lives and making them feel good. And that's now a purpose, a proper purpose. And in fact, that's a privilege. It's not a job anymore. Most people think, I'm a nail technician, it's just a job, it's boring. It's not boring. And it's not repetitive, because every single time you sit opposite somebody, that's an opportunity to start a relationship with that individual. This is not just a job anymore. I mean, who gets that opportunity to build so many relationships over a period of time? You don't get that if you're working in the supermarket or wherever. So I just got everyone to understand that this was a unique opportunity to really do something meaningful and to touch people's lives in a positive way.
So that links beautifully back to what I was talking about earlier, of you don't have to, you have the opportunity to. But it's okay if you've got one little shop to try and teach people this. How do you get that message to go throughout everything and for people to properly buy into it, especially if somebody does need the money?
So we never played down the importance of the money. We know how important the money is. We're just saying that it's the reward. It's not the purpose. So we get the sequence right. That's what it is. We don't for 1 minute say that you don't need money, or it's not important, or that you don't want to feed your family, etc. We all know how important those things are, but they come as a result of what you do, never the reason that you do it. Because when you focus on making money, you're going to cut corners, you're going to save costs, you're not going to give the service that the guests, we used to call them guests, deserve. So it was just about changing the mindset of why people come to work and what they needed to do. And once we started to get that right, and the people started to realize the importance of what they were doing, all of a sudden the loyalty starts building, and people keep coming back because they're getting not just good service, but a great attitude as well. So attitude becomes the kicker. When it comes to the technical stuff, the technical service, how to do the set of nails, how to do a facial, or whatever it is, many other people out there are doing the same as us. We never claimed to do the best nails, the best facials. What we did want to do is we wanted the attitude of the employees to be much better than what was out there. we wanted people to say, wow, this is different, this place. I feel good here. I feel that I'm important. I can speak to people. I can build a relationship with my guests, etc., etc. So all of that stuff becomes the competitive advantage. And if you had to ask me what was the real difference that allowed us to be successful and to grow to 225 stores, I would say it was the attitude of our people towards service and towards their guests.
So how do you take that? First of all, you have people you're employing, and some people, I presume, didn't operate as you wanted them to.
Yeah.
Did you need to fire some people, get rid of them? How do you handle that when you're trying to build a culture of we're in this together?
Yeah, no, it's always challenging. There's no easy walk to freedom here and this thing. So the thing about it is that you have to get people to understand, particularly the staff and the franchisees, what service is all about. And if they don't quite get it, and if they can't understand why we offer people a free treatment if they're not happy, then we've got to sit with them and explain. And if they are adamant that this is not for them, then we would strongly encourage them to sell their business, which is really what happened a few times. But by and large, I think most of the people, you can never get everybody, but most of the people started to buy into this philosophy, so that if somebody came with a product that they weren't happy with, even though they'd had it for 6 months and the thing was virtually empty, and they wanted a refund, most beauty salons would have told them to, this is nowhere. I'm not going to. What can I do with that? So we said, no, come, bring it, because we worked out that the average loyalty member spent about 5,000 rand per annum with us. Over 5 years, that was 25,000. So if they came in, and it didn't even have to be a product that was bought at us, as long as it was something that we also sold. So if someone had bought it somewhere else and they wouldn't refund, they come to us, right? We said, no problem. Sign the loyalty form for us, and we'll give you a full refund, even though you didn't buy it yet.
So what's the loyalty form?
The loyalty is to become a loyalty member. So
Okay,
you get benefits, yeah.
Right.
And those people spend, as I said, 5,000 rand per annum. So you're giving a refund for about 300 or 400 rand for a product to get back 25,000. So that is not a refund. That's an investment in a new client.
Fantastic. Looking at it slightly different.
Completely.
Just an interesting story that you might not know of that links to your Kmart story.
Yes.
So many years ago, I heard a story of a guy came into Kmart with old tires, and he wanted to hand these tires back. And they went through the whole process, and it was worn down tires, and Kmart took those tires. And somebody looked at us and said, but Kmart, you don't even sell tires. Like, why you? And it's the exact story that you're talking about.
Yes, I've heard that story. And it's exactly the same thing. For most people who are in business who are focused on the money, their first reaction is, this person's taking a chance and I'm being abused here. Therefore, I'm not going to allow this to happen. Right? However, for us, we said, no, forget about the abuse. It's not abuse. This is an opportunity to get a new client and to keep one for the next 5 years. So it was a completely different type of strategy and philosophy.
Have you kept stats over the years of how many people have a treatment and say, no, it wasn't great? And do you have what we call repeat offenders?
Yeah, there are some serial offenders, or serial abusers, we used to call them. But at the time that I left Sorbet, we were doing somewhere around 400,000 treatments a month. And of those, if I remember correctly, it was somewhere between 100 and 200 refunds, which is obviously 0.00 something. So it was minuscule in terms of the bigger picture, and therefore was nothing to worry about. So we just took it back, and if our franchisees, for whatever reason, refused to take it back, we would come down quite on it, because that was a big part of our philosophy.
So explain the franchise model to us. So you've got a couple of stores. You now want somebody else to buy and own their own store, and you will supply the product, but they have to think and operate the same way as you do.
Yeah.
Just how do you manage that?
Okay, so it's very important that everyone buys into the philosophy, because otherwise you mustn't get involved. And often people come into a franchise environment thinking that I'm now going to be an entrepreneur. But it's not quite like that, because when you buy into a franchise system, they're quite strict rules. And we were pretty strict with what they could keep, what products they could sell, how they managed their business. So we had people checking on them all the time. We wouldn't allow them to employ their own staff, because we had to trade test them to see that they were of the right skills in terms of their serving abilities. So it's not an entrepreneurial environment. We used to say that you're running a business for yourself, but not by yourself.
Okay, fantastic.
Not by yourself. That's the bottom line, basically.
If you just tuned in, we're talking to Ian Fuhr, the founder of the Sorbet Group. So you ran these businesses, and then did you have any major failures? I heard at one stage you tried to expand overseas.
Yeah.
What were the lessons learned from that?
Yeah, I think too numerous to mention there. We learned a lot of lessons there. And I think the biggest thing was, quite frankly, my own arrogance, that I realized that you can't just assume that what is working in one country is just automatically going to work. We went into the UK with the attitude of they've been waiting for something like this. Well, we had to wait a bit longer because it didn't work. It didn't work at all. There were multiple factors actually why it didn't work. One of them, as I say, was we probably didn't do enough homework in terms of understanding the market in the UK, because it is quite different. Although we thought it was pretty similar, it wasn't at all. And very interestingly, the quality of the beauty therapists in the UK was not quite up to our standards, funny enough.
Yeah.
That was quite a surprise, because it wasn't, I think the education side wasn't up to scratch. So we had people that we had to retrain in order to be able to do it at the level that we required. And yeah, so that was a problem. Also, it's a very multinational society. So we were getting therapists as far away as Venezuela and Siberia. And I mean, you couldn't, every country on the map, we had one of them. So they all come with different education in terms of their skills and knowledge in the beauty industry. That was quite hard. I must say that was quite hard. But again, we can't blame that entirely. I think we have to look at ourselves. Like in anything, when you learn, you've got to learn and sort of dust yourself off, get up and try something else. So it was, in fact, you learn a lot more from failure than you do from success, in my view.
So we're going to come back to that in a second. We're going to go for an ad break and then come back to that. And when we come back, I'm going to ask you, what is it that you learned through the failure that you hadn't learned before?
Sure.
Good evening. You're listening to the Ort Jet Business Show. I'm David Zidel. I'm talking to Ian Fuhr, who's the founder of the Sorbet Group and also runs a institute called Hatch, which we will get to just after this. So Ian, I said to you, when we go to the break, I want to ask you about some of the lessons that you learned. So two things. One was what were the lessons that you learned there that you hadn't learned before?
Right.
Number two, if you can just take us through, how do you cost something? So you're offering a service, how do you cost that? And then I'd like you to please unpack a little bit about your Hatch Institute.
Right, okay. So I think I mentioned a couple of things already in terms of what we learned. The first thing is understand the market before you go venturing out there. As an entrepreneur, maybe I can share this with you. I found there are four things that one has to focus on, or have to have in terms of characteristics. The one is intuition. You need to be able to know that something is right, even though you don't have the evidence to prove it. So when you're starting something new, you've got to believe in it. You've got to stick to it and keep working, even though you don't have any proof of results. That's the one thing.
So before you move on, I want to interrupt you there because it's a question I meant to ask earlier. We all have times where things are not going the right way.
Yes.
And some people say, stick with it, keep going. you're going to make a success. I mean, this you refer to as intuition, and others say stop banging your head against the same wall expecting different results.
Yeah.
How do you know when you must push through and when you must stop?
Sure. If I had the answer to that, David, I'd be a very rich man. Really, it's a tough one. I think it's just a gut feeling. That's what intuition is. It's an instinct. It says, okay, you're on the right track. Just keep at it, keep at it. And there were many times when I was looking over the precipice, and because I was having to fund the business for 4.5 years myself before it broke even, putting money in every single month to be able to pay salaries because we couldn't sell franchises. Nobody had really started showing interest in franchises. So that's the thing, you've got to sometimes just keep going. There were often times when I thought I was losing it, what's wrong with me? Why don't I understand what's going on? Somebody once asked me if I could remember the exact moment that I'd lost my mind when I was doing all these things, because I only started Sorbet when I was 51. People, what does an old man like you know about the beauty business? So there were a lot of questions and people were challenging me all the time. But the thing is, the other issue, which I think it comes back to in terms of what you need, is you can't be afraid to fail. If you're afraid to fail, you'll never be a successful entrepreneur because you're not going to try the things that need to be tried. You're going to shy away. You're going to worry about failure. You're worrying about this, worrying about then you shouldn't be in business as an entrepreneur. Then you should be what they call a settler as opposed to a pioneer. It's fine. It's not a problem to be a settler. The pioneer goes out there without a map and faces all the dangers and challenges. That's what entrepreneurial is. And then, on the other hand, the settler comes afterwards and buys the map, which is great, but it's less risk. And the settler stands on the mountain overlooking the plains and says, "Is it safe out there now?" And I say, "No, it's never safe. It's never safe." And so the other thing is courage. You need courage to keep going when things are looking bleak. And then finally, you need determination for the long haul, because nothing happens overnight here. There's no quick. I think that's one of the biggest problems with startup entrepreneurs, is they think it's going to be quick. And it never, very seldom is, unless you somehow hit the jackpot. But for the mere mortals out there like me, and everyone else, it takes time to build it up.
It's like that saying, it takes 20 years to become an overnight success.
Correct. And people say experience is important, but there's another saying that says 20 years of experience is not necessarily 20 years of experience. It's actually 1 year of experience repeated 20 times. Yeah. So, and then after the Sorbet story and I sold the business. And
just before you get there, if I can just jump back a little bit, just from the people who are listening with their businesses and they're not sure, how do you cost something? So how did you price all the different services and products? Is there a methodology around pricing things?
I asked somebody who knew how to do that.
So there's a lesson, outsourcing.
Yeah. Well, there are people that know more than you, which is basically what I did. Look, I mean, there's certain formulas that you work on, and the margins have to be right, and the mixes have to be right. I think one of the things that we did well was we developed a commission system for the staff that was quite sort of incentivized for them. And that was one of the things from a financial point of view that we did well. But otherwise, it was just running a business. It's not rocket science. The branding, the culture, those are the things that you really need to focus on. But the actual operations, as long as you understand the systems and you know what you do, that's not my scene, quite frankly. I was never very good at that. And I claim to be. That's why I sold the business, because after it hit the 1 billion rand sales mark, there wasn't any fun really running a business of that size anymore. I've always enjoyed building businesses, not necessarily running them when they get bigger.
Yeah. Wow, that's amazing. And then you hatched this idea of starting an institute.
Yeah, and I think the culture thing worked so well at Sorbet. It really did. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to start a consultancy, a coaching and consultancy business that will be teaching people how to do this thing. And I called it cultureneering. That was the name that I gave the culture framework.
And that's the name of your second book, is that
Third
right?
book, yeah.
Third book.
That's the third book. And yeah, and that's what I'm doing now every day, keeping busy with, clients large and small, and helping them with cultureneering, how to build a strong culture in a diverse workforce that lays the platform for obsessive customer service. That's essentially what it is.
Wow. And it's interesting because a lot of people are consultants out there who've read a book about something and try to teach it. But you've lived it. You've been through this. In fact, you started Sorbet, as you said earlier, with the key focus being culture. So you obviously believe deeply in culture, and I can hear it through this conversation that it's almost like that's almost the be all and end all.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And in South Africa, culture has another aspect to it, and that's race. So race relations for me has been always a huge fascination. And in my last book, my most recent book is called The Human Bridge, which is about racial healing in South Africa. And that's a big part of what we do. Is, if you're trying to build a culture, you can't build a culture without taking into account all the diversity issues. If you try and smooth that over and hope that it goes away by itself, that's really a very short-sighted approach. And that's what we help our companies with, is to get them to pay attention to the issues that have created the problems in South Africa. We're a highly racially polarized society. We still, as much as we would like to believe, we've moved on. Yes, we've gone beyond apartheid, but we haven't gone beyond polarization. But yet, we have the constitution, we have a country that has changed, but our society still has got lots of work to do. And so all these things impact on the business and on the culture. So if you don't understand them, you're not going to understand why people think and behave the way they do. And you're going to be completely off the mark in the way that you manage and lead them. So it's an integral part of culture, is to understand the diversity and how we got ourselves into this mess in the first place.
If you just joined, I'm talking to Ian Fuhr, the founder of the Sorbet Group and now the CEO of, do you call it Hatch or Hatch?
The Hatch Institute.
The Hatch Institute. And we're going to wrap up the conversation a little bit when we come back after the break. Welcome back. You're listening to the Ort Jet Business Show. I'm David Zidel. I'm talking to Ian Fuhr. And in my mind, Ian Fuhr was Sorbet. But we're unpacking a lot more around what Ian Fuhr was, then became Sorbet, and now is developing further. And the Hatch Institute, which talks about culture. And during the break, you mentioned something about building or healing the health relations in South Africa. Just unpack that a little bit more.
Yeah, so that's my latest book. It's called The Human Bridge, and it's about racial healing in South Africa. So it looks into all the reasons why we are such a polarized society. South Africa is still officially the #1 most unequal country in the world, officially now. And this is a result of our 300 years of systemic racism and the belief in what we call the hierarchy of human value. So the hierarchy of human value says that some groups are superior to others and therefore must be treated differently. And then, of course, during the apartheid years, that was entrenched in law. And the lingering consequences of those things, particularly from a point of view of the psychological damage, something that we talk about a lot in this book. And now we're in the process of launching a Human Bridge movement, where we're going to get people to join us and to get involved in these racial healing activities and promote racial healing throughout the country in different formats.
So if anyone listening to us today wants to get involved in this, how can they do that?
Yeah, so they can get hold of me at ian@thehumanbridge.co.za or ian@hatchinstitute.co.za.
And Ian, there's a saying that everyone's got a book in them.
Yeah.
You've already got 4 books out of you. Just, you're busy with all these businesses.
Yeah.
Just explain the process of being able to write 4 complete different books. Just take us through, why did you write them and what was your process?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one. The first book was really my story, my entrepreneurial short story, which I thought was unusual, and because of all the racial issues in there, it would be interesting. So I wrote that because I thought it would be interesting. The other two books before the racial healing one now were business books, about Sorbet and cultureneering, and they've been quite useful marketing tools for me. So that was the one reason. And the other thing is I enjoy writing, and I take time off when I write these books. I take time off. I go and spend time somewhere at the coast or with a friend, or sometimes in the bush for a couple of weeks, and I just sit and write for 2 weeks.
Okay, so it's not a process of every day over a year.
No, I can't write like that.
And you managed to write all these books within a short period of time?
Yeah, so this last book, The Human Bridge, I wrote together with a lady by the name of Nina de Klerk. She's the ex-sister-in-law of F.W. de Klerk. Her husband was Wimpy. You might remember the name Wimpy de Klerk. And she's a professor from UJ, and she did a lot of the research and some of the writing as well. And we got other contributors in the book. We had Rolf Meyer, and we had Bolam Mohali and people like that. So we had some quite interesting characters, Max Dupree, the journalist, etc., etc. So it's an exciting venture now. Now at age 71, I'm starting a new movement called the Human Bridge Movement. So people say, why don't you retire already? Well, I said, I have already retired for an afternoon nap, and now we carry on. I think my philosophy is I don't want to be dead before I die.
Wow, love that. So it sounds like you do something every 20 years. So it was at 51 Sorbet, then this at 71. I look forward to what you're going to do when you turn 91. If you're listening to us, this is the Ort Jet Business Show. I'm talking to Ian Fuhr, and I just want to unpack some of the things, the gems. And I think, Ian, I'm going to have to go back and listen to the recording to pick up some of the other gems. I couldn't write them down fast enough. But one of the focuses you said is money is the reward.
Yeah,
it's the result, not the reason.
Yeah.
So you go into business to serve, and you said it's about serving. The purpose of a business is serve, and if you serve people correctly, you'll get paid for it, and that's the reward. And you don't go in just to make money.
Correct. So that's a key thing. The other thing that I haven't mentioned on the leadership side could be of interest. We call it the moral authority to lead. So you have to earn the right to lead. In the old days, you would lead based on your position in the hierarchy of the organization, the structure. The higher up you were, the more power you had to tell people what to do. That doesn't work anymore. That's long gone. That's part of our history, not our future. And so what we have to do now is we have to earn the right to lead. We have to be trusted and respected. We have to show a genuine concern for the well-being of others. We have to show a real commitment to their growth and development. We have to create a place of safety where people can speak freely without fear. And there's a whole lot of different things. So it's about what we call earning the moral authority to lead. That is the new leadership style. It's about serving the people who are serving the people.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And I like the fact where you spoke about intuition, that you have an intuition that is going to work, and you have to follow that. And you can't be afraid to fail, because that then creates its own failure.
Correct.
And I love the difference between the two people, the settler or the pioneer.
Yeah.
I haven't heard of that before, but I think that's fantastic. And I think talking about the settler and the pioneer, maybe we should settle there. Or have you got something else you want to?
No, that's fine. It's just that the pioneer, goes out into the territory without a map, and that's the key, because that's the risk. They are the risk takers. The settlers are the opposite. They are the safety first, which is great. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you are going to be an entrepreneur, you need to be more of a pioneer than a settler.
And not looking for a roadmap, maybe looking for a compass to give you the direction you're going in.
You're just going out there and you're facing the challenges as they come.
Fantastic. Ian, it's been a fascinating debate. Thank you for being here. And All the best, and let me know when you start your new venture at 91. This is David Zidel. This has been the Ort Jet Business Show. I've been talking to Ian Fuhr, the founder of the Sorbet Group, and now the CEO of Hatch Institute. And we'll see you next week, same time.